Go ahead. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Board on Life Sciences discussion. We're very happy to be able to present a discussion on education and training to meet future needs of the life sciences and biotechnology enterprise within an increasing contract research and manufacturing context. So our specific goals are to ask our speakers to discuss how this integration and use of contract research and manufacturing organizations into the enterprise is really going to create the need for a workforce that can support these important activities, and questions about the availability of individuals to do this work and their particular needs for education and training so that they are effective participants in this workforce. So on behalf of the board, I would like to ask our moderator, Patrick Boyle, who is Chief Science Officer at Ginkgo Bioworks, a synthetic biology company, to lead our discussion and introduce our distinguished speakers. Thank you, Patrick.
Great. Thanks, Anne. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. As we've been talking about the bioeconomy, we often think about biology as a research enterprise, but of course, for the bioeconomy, we need to actually make and manufacture things. Looking for where that workforce will come from and how they will be trained to support growth of the bioeconomy. I just think it's a really important topic, and looking forward to digging into this with the speakers that we have today. So we have 5 speakers who will be joining us here. We've asked each of them to provide about 5 minutes of commentary on their background and their work, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So with that, I'd like to start with Emily Arend from the Engineering Biology Research Consortium. Emily?
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Very nice to be with you all today. Thanks to the academies for inviting me. For this, my name is Emily Arend. I am the Director of Road Mapping and Education at the Engineering Biology Research Consortium, or EBRC. EBRC is a nonprofit public-private partnership organization with a mission to advance engineering biology research, innovation, and impact to solve national and global challenges. We are a membership organization, and our members really drive all that we do. We have about 200 academic members that represent the breadth of research and education in engineering biology, and about a couple dozen industry members that represent small startups to very big established companies. And perhaps most importantly for today's conversation, EBRC is home to a nearly 300-member student and postdoc association. These graduate students and postdocs come from very diverse backgrounds and have very diverse futures. They have gone on to become highly impactful PIs, lead burgeoning biotech companies, and work for U.S. national labs, among many other paths. So members of our Student and Postdoc Association are really those who are committed to the bioeconomy. They are going on to work for these contract research organizations and for biomanufacturers, amongst many other different jobs, and can also speak to the education and training that they've received at various different kinds of institutions with different kinds of scientific and engineering backgrounds as well. So a little bit more about EBRC. We are a science policy organization. We have some similarities to scientific societies and to think tanks, but we are kind of both of those and neither of those altogether. We're a bit of a unique little duck. Our value is in the expertise of our membership, however, and our affiliations and connections to the levers of the US government and international engagement really help us to do our work and help us to share the various challenges and bottlenecks that engineering biology research and the bioeconomy are facing, such that those technologies and industries can be really successful. EBRC has 4 focus areas. Education and workforce development is one, security, technical research road mapping, and policy and international engagement. And as I said, we're a membership organization, and our members volunteer their time and expertise to help us identify and communicate those bottlenecks and pressing needs in those 4 focus areas, as well as opportunities that exist to advance engineering biology, tools and technologies, regulations, legislation, and overall participation in the bioeconomy. So one of our kind of foremost outputs is technical research roadmaps. I serve as the executive editor and leader of all of those, and we just released our 6th technical research roadmap on engineering biology for space health, or keeping humans alive and healthy during space exploration missions, just released last week. But in addition to the research road mapping, we hold a number of community workshops, both throughout the United States as well as internationally. And then we write and publish white papers, policy papers on topics that are important to advancing engineering biology responsibly and effectively, while also accelerating research innovation and translation. Bringing it back to education and workforce development, EBRC has a number of activities that and programs that support education, training, and experiences beyond the lab bench, including internship program, mentorship programs, career development workshops, a really awesome podcast, and a number of other activities. And most of these are led by our Student and Postdoc Association, and our students and postdocs also contribute to the other activities and published papers and things that we have as well. For the topic at hand, we've really learned from our students and postdocs over the last few years that they're interested in seeking out more diverse and cross-disciplinary educational experiences, particularly knowing that with PhDs, they're going to be serving as leaders of research teams, see the C-suite of companies or other leadership in companies. And they know that they need more than just the tools and training techniques that they're getting in to engineer biology. So they need to have skills in leadership, management, effective communication, business fundraising, and need to be able to tackle challenges related to biosecurity, bioethics, research translation, and tech transfer. And we know that some of these students are getting these skills through their institutions and formal programs that they have access to, but we also understand that those experiences and that knowledge needs to be more broadly available to kind of the higher education and also other areas of education that are for people participating in the bioeconomy. I'll finally close with and lead into everybody else that we're thinking about the diversity of the experiences that these students are getting so that they can be really effective in industry for the bioeconomy, and not just working in the lab bench, but what it means to translate and transition to industry and those other skills that they need to be successful in business.
Great. Thanks, Emily. And I suspect we'll be coming back to the topic of kind of diversity of skill sets, needed here as well, because I think that's a really important aspect, of the kind of workforce question in bioeconomy. So next we have Linnea Fletcher, who's joining us from the Austin Community College and Innovate Bio. Linnea?
Now, I have slides, so should I share my slides, or do you have the slides?
I believe we will share the slides for you.
Oh, good. Then I don't have to do that. Let me get rid of there. Great. So I represent a educational center known as Innovate Bio that's funded by the National Science Foundation. And it represents over 136 two-year programs across the nation in biotechnology for producing the technician workforce. It also represents their high school partners, also their four-year partners, They have industry advisory boards that we get information from. And essentially, some of them also have incubators, community colleges who have bioscience incubators. I'm one of them. We have an incubator at Austin Community College. We also have what is known as hubs because one center cannot do all of biotech workforce. So we invented hubs to focus on particular areas that we think are important, like genomics. And one hub I thought you might find interesting is that we have an alumni networking hub where we do speed dating between alumni and students who might potentially be interested in the programs or who are in the programs. So if you want to check out any of those, feel free. We gave you codes to check out our website and also our hubs. Next slide. So one thing I wanted to emphasize is we are a networking organization because there's so many initiatives in the bioeconomy, biotech education between manufacturing institutes, all the different schools and nonprofits that we try to network and join individuals and organizations together so we do not reinvent the wheel. Like there's already a lot of curriculum. And for example, joining BioBuilder together with others, or what's going on in Salt Lake or Utah. We have a lot of reports. We have a report on all the community colleges that have incubators. And these incubators not only help startup companies, but also engage students. And we have a newsletter if any of you are interested. It's put out every month and it talks about the larger biotech community. But besides that, we also have LinkedIn and a Facebook page. Next slide. Now, one thing I really want to focus on during this session is the idea is that the career pathway starts in K through 12, but goes all the way up till, well, until people retire, essentially. And that's what people need to realize is that people who become technicians don't stay as technicians. They may get an associate degree, or I also train bachelor students. 50% of the students in community college programs already have degrees. And so you have to think about the whole continuum. And when you talk about careers to students that are in middle school, high school, you talk about the fact that their career will span all the way till when they retire, and then, people don't successfully retire anymore. And each exit point during this whole continuum should be resulting in a job that industry determines. And this is something that's really important. I think we need to emphasize that. And that's why educational institutions need to be working together to identify exit points to career pathways and jobs. And not only within biotech. I'll give you an example that students in Oregon in the biotech program in Portland, if they have clean room experience, they're actually getting jobs in the semiconductor industry. And this is important because when you're looking at the bioeconomy and also other advanced technologies, when they go up and down in terms of companies releasing people, they have to find jobs. And we need to understand that and be able to communicate that to our students. So remember, this is a center grant that is supposed to be the umbrella for all of biotech education, which is an improbability. And to be able to do that, it has to network with all the other organizations that are out there and create the career pathway awareness for all students, which is the number one problem right now for programs. They don't know what biotechnology is, students and parents, and they don't know what the biotech career pathways are. And this is our mission as part of the center. And the center is located at Austin Community College. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'd love to come back and talk a little bit more about kind of the entry point into these programs, mentioning, parents and people coming in at the high school and associate level. I think, an area that we'd like to explore. Next, we have Natalie Coldell from MIT.
Thank you, Patrick. And I did have a few slides as well, if you don't mind showing them. Thank you. So I was invited to share a little bit about the view of the world that I have, as well as some of the work that we do at BioBuilder. So the first couple of slides are really about the big idea and approach that we take and why we take it. So just to set it up, with the key messages to take away from this are that if we do have big goals for education, we really are going to need bigger ideas to reach them versus piecemeal approaches. So I hope that comes through in not only the work that we do at BioBuilder, but through this discussion. I will hope you'll hopefully leave these next few slides seeing how high quality public education in life science is vital to enabling broad participation in the bioeconomy. And I will say a little bit about how BioBuilder and our new skills-oriented curriculum called Biotech Builder can contribute to a national model that overcomes some really key checkpoints. So on the next slide, if you can show it, if there's one slide that you remember, I hope it will be this one. It shows the educational attainment of the distribution in the United States over the last 50 years or so. And it shows this beautiful upward trajectory from about 7% of our citizens having college graduation or more back in the 1960s, all the way up to about 40% right now. So 40% of the US has a college degree or greater. And then that blue curve that you see above it is an equally, up and to the right curve that shows high school graduation rates. And it was, 40% back in the 60s, and now it's up at 90%. And when I see this graph, what I think is either you can view it as the greatest success story in American education in the last 50 years because of these upward trajectories, or you could see it as the greatest failure in our system of the last half century. And that's because we have told our citizens that they need a college degree to have a quality job, and that leaves 6 out of 10 behind. We have 65% of America that does not have formal education attainment beyond high school. And so in the next slide, I'll show you that those who go to college, only about a third of them major in STEM fields. So even of that 4 out of 10, we have a third majoring in STEM. And of those who graduate from college with a STEM degree, only half of them, let's say, go into STEM fields. So there is a tremendous attrition of the talent from our country if we are relying on just a narrow slice of the pool, the talent pool, and focusing on college graduation talent and higher. And I think with this next chart, you'll see that we are. So on the next slide, you'll see that this is a graph that reflects the accessible life science jobs that are posted for those with a bachelor's degree. This is showing Massachusetts saying that 90% require a bachelor's degree or higher. That's lower than it is in the rest of the United States, where it's more like 20% have jobs that are available in life science for those who have an associate's degree or a high school degree. So we are leaving a lot behind if we are relying on college degrees for filling the talent pool in life science. So those are the worldview kinds of data that I wanted to present. I'll spend just now 2 minutes talking a little bit about BioBuilder, if I could have the next slide. BioBuilder aims, it's a nonprofit organization that I started out of my teaching at MIT. We were founded in 2011, and our goal is to build a better world by educating more people in life sciences. And so what we do is develop science curricula that can deliver both the relevant skills as well as the knowledge for students in modern life science. And our curriculum empowers and excites students to pursue their education and engagement with life science, giving them opportunities, especially those who have faced societal barriers, to enter college and careers in life science. The students who participate in BioBuilder are finding new ways to think about life science and to learn those skills, and they're exposed to a range of options for their futures, both in terms of pursuing STEM in college and, as I mentioned, because that will be insufficient to fill the pipeline, also ideas about pursuing employment in industry with or without a post-secondary education. Ultimately, this is aimed at building professionally and personally fulfilled adults with wealth building and gratifying careers, fulfilling the needs of the bioeconomy workforce, and helping society reach the technological improvements that it needs to address our challenges using science. I have 2 more slides. If you could show the next one. Our aspirational goal is to have a BioBuilder program in every high school in America. There are 25,000 public high schools. Public school was always recognized as a foundational need for our country to enable students to live, to live as citizens in our country and enable liberty and opportunity. We are currently in 49 of the states. We have 9 programs to curricula, the BioBuilder and the Biotech Builder curriculum that I'll mention next. We are in multiple countries around the world. 66 have engaged with us, and about 63,000 students have worked on BioBuilder content since 2011, largely through the 600 plus teachers that we have trained directly in our teacher professional development programs, although I'll say that we do not need to train teachers to be able to deliver BioBuilder. And then on my very last slide, I will just say that we are, as I said, a nonprofit organization, and our goal is to empower this next generation to solve these serious challenges that our planet is facing using science and life science. BioBuilder's curriculum is been around since 2011, and it uses problem-based learning modules that students can try to solve technical societal challenges that matter to them using biotechnologies that they develop. We train educators as well as industry professionals. And our newer curriculum called Biotech Builder is a plug-and-play skills-oriented curriculum that prepares students to test for stackable micro-credentials that are electronic badges on their resumes. So just as Linnea had mentioned, that you might have a person who knows how to work in a clean room, who might then work in the semiconductor industry. If we can document the skills that students have coming out of these training programs and allow employers to recognize those skills and hire for skills rather than degrees, I think we can more equitably meet that whole stack of those who graduate from college as well as those who graduate from high school throughout our country. We can also transform the high school experience so that it is meaningful and engaging. Breaks my heart to hear the number of students who just find nothing interesting in their schools right now, and we are really losing a tremendous opportunity if we leave them behind. And if we don't, there'll be jobs that they want, that they're excited to have, and that our society needs. I'll just end by doubling down on what Emily had said, which is that our students come from diverse backgrounds and will have diverse futures. And if we're going to take a big swing at some educational goals, we really should do it in a way that meets those diverse backgrounds and those diverse futures.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Natalie. Next, we have Tamara Gitz from the Utah STEM Action Center.
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks, everybody. It's great to be on the panel with such amazing colleagues and friends. So the STEM Action Center is a little bit of a different organization from some of the presenters here, where we were established by the Utah State Legislature back in 2013, and we are located in the governor's office as part of the executive branch. And our 4 pillars that statutorily we're mandated to deliver upon are outreach and engagement, to K through 16, foundational skills. So we focus a lot on professional learning. We consider math a foundational skill for our students because it truly is the door that closes for them very early. So we try to find innovative ways to keep that door open and keep them successful in math. Advocacy and developing partnerships, and then also We work in talent development a lot with partners in the state. And a lot of our focus is in early career connections, trying to find innovative ways to get kids interested when they're young in appropriate ways and keep them interested. And so one of the things that, I should also say that we, our mandate also is to partner. We partner with K-12, we partner with higher ed partners. We are partnering with industry for everything, of course. And then, but we also work with other state agencies as well as community and cultural partners. And so one of the disconnects that we continue to struggle with, and I don't know if this is the same for other states, but for Utah, it persists. And I don't know if you remember years back when ACT used to put out the state reports for STEM achievement through ACT testing. And in those reports for Utah, there was a real disconnect between ability and desire or interest. And we saw in Utah, there was a huge disconnect between the fact that a lot of our students were totally capable of doing STEM-based work, such as life sciences, but they had no interest. And so the sad part I have to say is that we still have that problem. In fact, working with U-Science, which probably a lot of you are familiar with, we see that disconnect persist in the reports that come back from U-Science. So this is something that really makes us focus on outreach and engagement. In fact, we consider it as one of the cross-cutting, it cross-cuts across all of our pillars or our goals in the STEM Action Center. And so to that point, we spend a good deal of time looking at how do we get kids interested early? How do we keep them interested? And so we have several programs we've been working with over the last several years that are specific to life sciences. One is through a BioMade grant, which many of you are familiar with as a manufacturing institute with the Department of Defense. We've got some programs that we've developed that we work with school districts and their work-based learning specialists to do activities with kids to get them excited not only about life sciences as we've been doing it for years, which is around pharmaceutical and diagnostic, but to expand their awareness of what's going on in bioindustrial, which is very exciting for kids because then you get into alternative energies and some of the really cool microbial work in industrial materials and the environment and aerospace and defense. We're also working with our manufacturing companies because we have a large medical device industry here in Utah. And so interestingly enough, this conversation arose with a group we work with that works with clients on the spectrum. And we're working with manufacturing companies to create some fun career exploration opportunities, such as competitions for them to gown up and assemble intravascular catheter devices as a competition to see who can get through it, as a career opportunity to look and see what it's about. And then we're also working with industry on some simulated experiences that can be modeled after kind of a simulated apprenticeship opportunity. And I can talk about that later. But so you can see we work in the exposure area quite a bit in the STEM Action Center because we feel like if we can do that well, we'll make the job easier for our colleagues in post-secondary and in industry. And then finally, we've been getting back into this conversation around internships and research opportunities for high school students. I know everybody here thinks about this a lot, and we have I think right now, 24 high school programs that do one-year classes in biotechnology for high school students. And one of the challenges we've had for years has been to try to find legitimate, scalable, and sustainable research opportunities and internship opportunities for our high school students. It's much easier for our post-secondary students, as many of you know, but for high school students, there are a lot of challenges to having a sustainable and scalable research and internship opportunity for them, which is important because we know our programs that have been able to figure out how to crack that nut, that their students transfer into post-secondary programs and into entry-level job positions, they're much more likely to do that transfer. And so we have two models that we've worked with, a contract science, a CSO model, as well as an incubator, training incubator model. But the problem with those, they're not very scalable, right? There's only certain districts that can actually invest to this degree in providing almost what we call internal research and internship opportunities. So we're back to revisiting some ways in which we could scale either the CSO model or how we could provide engaging alternatives such as rotational shadowing programs, which we've had success with in our healthcare industry over the last several years. And then finally, I mentioned to Linnea earlier before this, we would love to look at how to create a community of practice on a national level on almost a match.com on trying to find the appropriate research opportunities for our high school students that we could collaborate, because there's so much opportunity even virtually now to do these types of collaborations. We're looking to create a portfolio of research opportunities for high school programs that align to the teachers' abilities as well as for high school students. And so this is where we're playing right now. We're excited to be a part of a larger conversation, and I'm happy to engage in any of the questions that are following. Thank you.
Patrick, can I add one thing for Tammy?
Of course.
So FYI, I'll send you the information. So Oxford Nanopore just came out with reduced pricing for their MinION, and you can do large scale undergraduate or high school research with them. Did you? And that just came out of Cold Spring Harbor. I'll send you the info. And
Cool.
Natalie, you'll be interested in that too. And I'm sure Twist would be interested in that too.
Yeah, I'd love to circle back to that, because I think there is also kind of an aspect to this of the accessibility of the technology, and how that enables earlier entry points, for training. And I think just the technology getting cheaper, I think does have a big role to play there. Before we go there, we have one additional speaker, so I'd like to throw it over to Tyson Shank from KCAS Bio. Thanks, Tyson.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, I've got just a few slides to orient you to a little bit about who we are, and then kind of get to what we see as some of those critical success needs for our talent. But I'm our Senior Director of Organizational Development and Change, and I've been with the organization for right at about 3 years now. So I've really seen it up through its journey. When I first started, we had a little under 170 employees and one site in Olathe, Kansas. And today we're approaching 400 employees with a 3-year growth plan to continue to grow at a rapid pace. And so if you click over to the next slide, you can see a little bit about kind of who we are. Really, our tagline is Science Accelerated, and that's our goal, is to try to accelerate the development process to get drugs to market, to really bring those life-changing drugs to market smoothly, safely, sustainably. And we do really depend on the expertise within our team to help consult and guide sponsors through the development process. And we really work with a wide range. I say KCAS really looks to be that kind of Goldilocks in this space where there's a lot of really big CROs, there's a lot of really small CROs, but there really aren't a lot of people in that middle market that can be that full service bioanalytical solution that can meet the needs, whether you have one molecule that you're trying to work through to bring to market, or whether you've got a whole portfolio. Click over to the next slide. You'll see we're located globally. So we've got our main headquarters in Olathe, Kansas, just outside of Kansas City. We've got a site in Philadelphia, one in Lyon, France, and then we have a partnership with a company in Melbourne, Australia. And so this really allows us to service those large pharma clients that need to be able to process samples globally across their network. Next slide, please. And so when I say full services solution, this is the list of the things that we can do. So we really kind of have our biopharma side, our pharma side, flow cytometry. We also have molecular services, and we do you see some ancillary components that are revolve around those areas. So we really do have a breadth of services that we offer and that we have to train employees to as they onboard into the organization. You click over to the next slide. You'll also see that we have a wider range of toys for them to play with. So lots of different platforms and instrumentation technologies available within those various areas. And so, we're not only training them on techniques and working in the regulatory environment, but also some of them then kind of move over into developing their expertise around the instrumentation. And there's career pathways and platforms there. If you move over to the next slide, there's a couple clicks here. So if you click once, one of the critical needs that I hear from our team, our leaders, is the deep scientific knowledge. I think there's kind of maybe a historical belief that in the CRO industry, you don't need the deep science knowledge, but that's really no longer the case. Really, we have to be able to have the same level of knowledge in those science areas to help guide our sponsors through where their needs are, or even to get them to that new drug development application. The next click will take you to agility. And this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges and stumbling blocks for a lot of people, particularly when they come out of academia, if they've gone through a PhD program, and the pace that we move at in the CRO is extremely rapid. And constantly changing. A lot of scientists really like that stability and dependability of things in what they do. And this can be a real kind of culture shock for them as they come in, where day to day they have samples arrive that we didn't expect to arrive. And we have to reshift our entire day and process to be able to take care of those things. So that can be a real major shift for people as they come in, but super critical to our success in the CRO industry. The next click will take you to critical thinking. We really have to solve the challenges for our clients. Oftentimes we get molecules brought to us that they've tried to bring forward with other CROs, and it's just a challenging molecule, and they haven't had much success. And so they need us to take a fresh look in a different way of how we attack this challenge that they've brought us. So you do have to have that critical thinking to figure out how can we use the various platforms and techniques we have to get to what the sponsor is looking for. That process orientation, not only do we have people that need to follow a process to a T and not deviate from those things, they also have to be actively thinking and vigilant to where are their process gaps. As there's constantly shifting needs that a client's bringing us that might need slight tweaks or shifts to our process. And then, of course, one of the challenges as they move up in their career and become more client-facing is figuring out what's the right level of information I need to convey to a client. That I am not given a dissertation and defending everything that I did. What's the meaningful things that I need to give them to allow them to move forward? On the next click, you'll see mindset is super critical for us. One of the biggest shifts that we see with a lot of talent coming in is they've never been exposed to what it means to work in a regulatory environment. And so that muscle memory is one of the hardest things for us to develop within our talent, is breaking them of habits where that now they need to, they were working with their left hand, now we need them to work with their right hand because of the eye from regulatory environments that are looking for certain things. And so they're really kind of entering an environment that they weren't necessarily totally prepared for. And so they have to have that growth mindset that as they lean into this, it's part of the growth curve, and that's not failure. They're making strides to where we need them to get. And then the soft skills, or what we call durable skills in the talent development world. So being able to communicate concisely around those activities and timelines, and then certainly the emotional intelligence piece. It's really a big focus for us right now with our talent, is the how matters. And when you're working in a scientific world where everyone likes to be precise and everybody likes to be experts, and there's also, you layer on a lot of stress with the timelines and the pace. Those areas around stress tolerance, being able to read the room, being able to kind of check your ego from time to time as you work through challenging problems becomes really important. And so then at the next click, just some things I know as I talk with a lot of our leaders about where there's potential bridge opportunities that would really help us. You know, that GLP, that good laboratory practices, regulated area piece is a one we have to invest a lot of time and energy and money in at our level to try to get people to develop those muscles for themselves. More work in electronic lab notebooks or those LIMS systems. You know, had an executive that really believes strongly that work with robots helps people understand how to write a work instruction that can work at scale. Something that will work not only for the first sample, but the 5,000th sample, and that somebody can rinse and repeat in those ways. And then, of course, one of the other pieces that we hear is that business side. Really, I think a lot of traditional focus of science programs is on the R side of the R&D, and really they would like to see, you know, more attention to the D side and the development side, and understanding that business element. So those are kind of some of the pieces that I think are top of mind for us in our world.
Great, thanks, Tyson, and thanks to everyone for the presentations. A lot of questions to dive into. I'll kick us off, and then I'll try to pull in members of the board who have questions, and then we'll also be taking questions from our viewers online. So I'll do my best to get to all of those. One thing I wanted to start with before we dive in is I realize we're going to be using a lot of jargon here. So I wanted to kind of quickly define from my perspective CRO and CDMO, because I think we'll be using those acronyms a lot, you know, from the standpoint of these are contract organizations that basically do contract research on behalf of other parties. Yeah, please correct me if you have an alternative interpretation, but CROs primarily do research on behalf of other companies, and CDMOs will do development and manufacturing support for companies. And of course, many of these companies will do a blend of both. But as we kind of say CRO, CDMO, wanted to make sure we kind of level set on what we mean by those terms. One thing that I heard a lot through each of the presentations is this idea of skills and kind of exit points from training programs and entry points, you know, into companies. So, you know, Natalie, I wanted to start with you. You had a diagram, you know, in your talk where you were showing, you know, a number of folks, a good percentage of folks actually coming from non-STEM fields and moving into STEM jobs. And I was wondering if you kind of saw that in your programs with respect to, you know, kind of crossover skills coming from other non-STEM fields that are really impactful, you know, in biology and biotechnology, and really where you see those types of folks coming from.
Yeah, so I have two, I don't know, maybe illustrative examples to give. One is to say that individuals who work in, say, commercial bakeries can be excellent individuals who can work in bioprocessing and you know, on the floor of a manufacturing plant, right? So to be able to follow a protocol, have it work the same time every time, and have quality control on your work and know that it matters to do it right every time. Those skills are transferable. So there are a number of initiatives. One's called this STARS, Skilled Through Alternative Routes, which are individuals who are in the working world finding, you know, using skills like at commercial bakery or bartending and finding a place in the bioeconomy where they can find a job that has a greater upward trajectory perhaps in their career. So that's I think one good example of individuals finding their path. I'll also say the flip side, we have some industry folks on our advisory panel for BioBuilder. And one of them said that she's in sales for a biotech company. And she said that if she saw a micro-credential from an applicant that said that they could do science, that would move them right to the front of the line. That she never, that those two pieces, the biotech sales piece and the skills at the laboratory, are often not found in a single person. So to be able to credential an individual for the skills that they have at the bench, if they're looking for a STEM. So if they had a business background and they're looking to get into a STEM field, that was your question, Patrick, right? If they had a micro-credential that they knew how to do aseptic technique and knew how to do documentation and small volume metrology, that would, according to this salesperson, say that would, when she's hiring, that would make them a very attractive hire.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Yeah, I'd love to open it up to other folks on the panel as well in terms of, maybe skills that either you're looking for when you're hiring or skills that are not often highlighted in more traditional degree programs that you think would be really impactful in this space.
Well, I think I mentioned the clean room. Clean room is actually important for several industries. And the fact that biotech students are getting jobs in semiconductor, because at this point, it pays better. Sorry, Tyson, sorry to say that, but sometimes semiconductor pays better than biotechnology. And it's important too, because for these biotech programs to survive, remember that our programs at community colleges only survive based on how many students they recruit, graduate, and place. And if the industry goes down, then you have to find alternative careers for them, at least for a while. So I've run a program for 30 years. I end up slicing people off into four-year schools for a while, into other industries. And then, like, if the semiconductor industry goes down and then we end up with these people on the market, then other academic or workforce programs take them in and retrain them. So then they learn more than one skill set and they can move around depending on what's happening. But then we don't lose that workforce. We still have it out there and we can recruit. Even high school teachers, by the way, have been thought about. Well, if they don't want to teach, I've had high school teachers they go off to the biotech industry. In fact, I can tell you right now, community college biotech programs have been losing their faculty to industry. So they started in teaching, they learned biotech, and they go off into industry.
Patrick, this isn't necessarily a skill-based opportunity, but we've been working very closely with a local nonprofit, Columbus Serves, that their clients are individuals on the spectrum. And so we have, one of the challenges we have is the medical device, the entry-level manufacturing positions. It's hard. I hate to say it, it's the girl in the room. It's hard to get kids interested in jobs like that. They don't want to, but Becton Dickinson, Merit Medical, and some of our device or intravascular catheter companies have reached out to us to see if we could work on how to do on-the-job training, and we'd help with recruitment. They develop the on-the-job training programs for individuals on the spectrum to take entry-level manufacturing jobs, which is a win-win, right? Because Columbus Serves, has a hard time placing their clients. And their mindset, their aptitudes, their attention to detail is perfect for the type of jobs that BD and Merit are looking for. So stay tuned. It's in development, but it's kind of exciting to have both those mutual benefits come together.
And speaking of skills, I think there's also the kind of context for these are life sciences jobs that require a lot of non-life sciences skills. Kind of mentioned even how to manage clients. One thing that you mentioned, Tyson, that I want to kind of explore a little bit deeper is you mentioned experience with automation. That seems to be an area where there's high crossover between other manufacturing industries and industries like semiconductors, like others have noted. But I think at least traditionally, I don't see a lot of interaction with automation in kind of traditional degree programs in biology. So I was curious, as you're recruiting folks in to work with automation and life sciences, what do you look for and what sort of programs there support training folks who can work with automation, in the context of a CRO?
That's a good question, Patrick. And I think that this is probably an area that's really on the forefront now, where we're just starting to figure out what we need to look for. I think we've kind of been in a place of growing our own, for the most part to this point, really taking people who have started at the bench as an analyst, have moved into a scientific role, seem to have an aptitude and interest in that area, and then we send them off to our partner companies to get trained up on the technology. So certainly if we see anything where someone has gone through some of those vendor credentialing programs, then that would be very appealing to us. But really, I think what we're seeing is, and I think to the point of, my exec from the flow cytometry space, it's really like if they've got experience coding, even that can suggest that, okay, they know how to break apart a process into its little pieces that can be replicated at scale, that can be very appealing from an automation standpoint.
I can add to that really quickly that I think, I hear from the members of our Student Postdoc Association and others that, especially as they're working on getting PhDs or post-PhD, automation is a like their ability to code and use machine learning and AI and understand how automation works is almost necessary these days, but they're also very excited about it. And so I think that can also translate into, bachelor's degrees, associate's degrees, etc. But it is interesting how much, even just in the last 2 years, that reliance for biotech jobs on and biotech research on automation and AI and ML has accelerated exponentially.
I was curious, with respect to, Tyson, you mentioned, as well that you often look for, accreditations coming from vendors, right? So like, particular types of equipment will offer basically accreditation for being able to use that sort of equipment. For the folks who are running training programs, is that an area of cooperation that you see, with these vendors? Like, what would make it easier to kind of bring in kind of these companies to develop training on these kind of specific, whether it's automation or instruments or other devices that are commonly used?
Well, I will tell you, we like to partner with vendors because I can provide the alumni, I can provide the students across the United States. They provide the training and the equipment. It's a win-win situation. We offered like 96 workshops and webinars in 4 years by partnering with vendors to do this, because they know if students and alumni have hands-on experience with new equipment, they will then want to recommend that. So that partnership is key for maintaining. So I ask industry, what do you need training on? And they tell me, and then I turn around and go after those vendors to provide the training.
So I'd like to open it up to the members of our board to ask questions as well. Kavita, you had a couple of questions on internships, so I thought I'd throw it over to you for a second.
Go ahead. So I was actually curious in terms of, I need to find the question on internships actually, but I was actually curious about what are the challenges? You mentioned that there are some challenges in being able to have scalable and sustainable internships. And also, what are the successes or the things that make those internships successful?
I mean, Kavita, I could speak to that with our program. So for us, quite frankly, it's volume. We have a lot of high school students. Here's what's really interesting in Utah. We have 20, like I said, I think 23 or 24 high school programs, of which you can imagine each one of those programs has at least 2 full sections, if not 3 for some school districts. So you imagine take 25 to 30 students times 2 to 3 per times 23 school districts. We have a lot of high school students that have taken the time to put a biotech program into their schedule, which is a big deal if you have high school juniors and seniors, right? Scheduling is a big deal. to put these classes in. And so we're looking for ways to get a large volume of appropriate and legitimate research projects into capstone courses for these students to enroll in as a next step. So that's one of our challenges, is just to have enough projects to spread the love around our different school districts to keep these students interested, so we can help with that, kind of facilitate that transition into post-secondary programs such as Salt Lake Community College. And we have to do this internally or on-site at our high schools, or through a CRO-based program or a training incubator like we have with our Bioinnovations Gateway program, because our companies, for whatever you can say, oh, it's not an FDA-based issue or whatever, it doesn't matter. The companies have said they cannot accommodate high school students for internships. Our college programs or university programs, not a problem there at all. And so we have to get creative about internal opportunities. So it's, and for the CRO model or for our training incubator, like I said before, not every school district can support those. So what we're trying to do is to create university school district partnerships to create new CRO models. And in fact, one of them with the University of Utah we're talking about is to engage doctoral candidates as mentors for some of those research projects. Because one of the things, and then I'll stop after this, we talked about in our planning that we've been talking to the University of Utah because for many of the federal-based programs, like through the NIH, they're requiring professors, PIs, to demonstrate that they have alternative internship opportunities for doctoral candidates, because there's just not enough opportunity in universities now to establish labs. So we're taking advantage of that opportunity to try to kind of up the game on our CRO model, if that helps.
It does. If I could actually just ask a follow-up, which is, in your ideal world, what sort of internship would you like to see high school students have? I mean, we just had a conversation about this within our board, about the lack of such internships, not just in industry, but across the board. So what would you like to see that could help prepare students who may not go to college, because the 4 out of 10 is a striking percentage, and, beyond?
I can tell you the reason we've seen such great success with the CRO model at the community college and Utah Valley University, and hopefully at the University of Utah, it's team-based. There's 2 factors that play into the CRO model that make it so compelling. One, the students get to work on a team, and that's a big deal at that age to have that kind of cohort model. 2, building in a near peer mentoring opportunity, such as we do, where we have the research opportunities on a college campus where the high school students can work with the college students, is huge. So those are 2 kind of components of what we found to be successful for an internship model. And that's not necessarily easy to do in a company. So in many ways, they're not the ideal internships for our high school students who really do need a lot more mentoring.
Yeah, and I would say the university level, in terms of, for us to be able, it's difficult for us to sustain an internship program because it's such a high ramp up time just to get them oriented to the regulatory environment. We don't count on a new analyst being fully productive until 90 days in, and that's best case scenario if we're able to move them through. So it's a real challenge for the desire for our leaders to want to take on an intern, just because of that burden that it really places on the business to try to train them and get them acclimated to that regulatory environment.
Yeah, I'll say, even from my perspective, is much more common for us to hire European students who have industry internship experience as part of their schooling, versus the U.S. It's just much more common over there. It's a really interesting kind of contrast that we see. Okay, so I'll hand it over to folks on the board who have questions now. So Anne, I'll call on you first, and then India. Thanks.
Wondering your perspective. I'm imagining that a lot of these students don't have much geographic mobility. And I'm wondering whether there's an approach that is regional or fairly local, where companies can partner with their own kind of community colleges or our high schools. Is there a way that you can do that effectively? But then I'm also imagining the other part of that is the company has to have people that are capable of training. And so they have to have teachers essentially within the company. Otherwise, you assign the entry level person to a scientist who may or may not have skills to really bring somebody up to speed. I wonder though, I mean, basically the question is how regional is this? And do we have, if it is regional, do you find any local government or state government support for these kinds of activities? I would think is pretty expensive. And those of you who are doing the nonprofit work, I'm sure you're scrambling to find resources to support the programs day in and day out. So I'm just curious about those two elements, the regional part, and if so, local or maybe even state level support. Is there enough attention being paid to this gap?
Can I jump in to say, yes, thank you for recognizing that as a nonprofit, we are scrambling always to find partners and resources for sure. But I wanted to mention a success story from BioBuilder, which is in rural Tennessee, the Appalachian Highlands there, where they have a long history of brewing and fermentation and did not appreciate that that was skills that were transferable to bioeconomy. So it's been a wonderful sort of growth partnership there where it's economic development, it's change in the high school, it's integration of BioBuilder into the curriculum throughout the region and soon throughout the state, we hope. I was at a workshop yesterday in Worcester and somebody from Elevate Bio was speaking there. That's a person who has Elevate Bio has a location here in Waltham, Massachusetts, but they've also just opened in Pittsburgh. And the question was, why Massachusetts? Like, what will keep you here in Massachusetts? And she continues to say it's talent. Industry will go where there is a talent pool. That is why rural Tennessee was betting on education as the draw for industry to the area and ways of leveraging their historical strengths in fermentation. Other areas have other strengths. The North San Joaquin Valley has, agriculture and winemaking, right? And Kansas City has this wonderful animal health corridor. Oklahoma, fuel, right? Every region has its regional strengths. And if we can leverage the regional strengths and train the talent pool, you will get STEM hubs opening in non-traditional locations because it cannot simply be in Boston and in San Francisco.
Yeah, good point. Excellent.
India?
Yeah, I love that question and answer because I think for bioeconomy, being able to have the distributed and whatever the local resources are, and if that is the talent resources, that also is part of that. But and now I feel like this might actually be more related to that last comment, where I thought I was coming in completely sideways. But I've been thinking a lot about the bioeconomy and these transferable skills. And I'm wondering if you know of anybody really actively reaching out to unions and being able to partner and do kind of reskilling with unions. And I can't imagine, like, how are we going to have a successful bioeconomy if that doesn't include unions? So any thoughts on that?
What a great idea.
Well, they did do that with the airline individuals for the airline industry in Northern California when that industry went down. They had the case, they reskilled them all for biotech. And then as soon as their jobs came back online, they went back to the airline industry. But it was really a win-win for a while there. So yeah, they do. So community colleges and other schools will do that. If there's layoffs or anything like this, they will do mass education to put people into entry-level jobs to take care of some of this. But whether they stay or not, I'm sure some of them did stay. So yeah, I think that is true. That's part of economic development, but essentially your regional economic development or workforce will organize these things.
It's an interesting question too, because that's one of the reasons we have found working with BioMade so appealing and expanding our traditional, concept of what our biotech programs do, right? Like a lot of programs across the country, Linnea can probably attest to this. A lot of our focus has always been in pharma and diagnostics and kind of the traditional idea of the bioeconomy. But being a part of the BioMade community has helped us to expand into cross-sector ideas around bioindustrial, like, materials, rubbers, plastics, and energy and
detergent. Remember
Yeah.
how they selected for the enzymes that would survive?
Yep.
Because they used little mini washing machines.
Yeah.
And when they started putting enzymes in Tide, people didn't realize that's why it said wash in cold water, because those enzymes wouldn't survive.
Absolutely.
That's all bioindustrial.
And I do think that we tend to get a little kind of, microscoped into certain areas when we think about this. But going to the regional conversation, I mean, we're doing more in ag and food than we ever have in our biotech programs. And it's been brilliant because, one, kids love it. It's such a low barrier to entry for some of these kids who don't think of themselves as, the science kids. And our communities outside of our, off of our, municipal front, they can get involved in the conversation as well. So you do tend to get more interest from our rural communities in the bio-based conversations.
And water quality. My students are being hired by water quality, environmental science, because water testing is everything now, especially after the pandemic. That's where they're tracking diseases now, is in the water. So environmental, our environmental science program bought a MinION sequencer because they're taking students down to Costa Rica to do barcoding. Okay, I'll buy it.
Well, I wanted to pull on the kind of regional topic a bit more, because I think it's again, given the diversity of roles in the bioeconomy, it can be hard to grasp kind of where these different centers are. For me, I think of the Midwest as kind of a biological solar panel for the rest of the economy, right? We grow corn and make things with corn, but I'd love to hear from folks about different hubs, like non-traditional hubs that they've recognized across the country for for the bioeconomy, because I think we do often think of this as like people pipetting in San Francisco, but there's much more than that.
Could I just mention, in Texas, do you know where biotech started? It wasn't pharma, it was ag. So all my students 30 years ago were all ag students doing biotech, because that's what they did on their ranches and farms. It started in ag, it's going back to ag.
I think that there was a great point made that it's biotech these days is much more than just pharma and biomedical. But I think that there's not a lot of the companies, and ag companies in particular to some extent, don't necessarily talk about the work that they do as biotechnology work. And they, for good reasons and bad reasons, but I think there might be one of the ways to accelerate the geographical diversity of the bioeconomy is for more companies and industries that are doing bio-related things to talk about themselves as biotech companies. Now, how do you influence that? How do you incentivize companies to be doing that is another entire conversation. But I think that when we have students thinking about internship programs, they're thinking about, okay, I'm gonna have to relocate to Boston or San Francisco. And it's because they're not recognizing that there are regional companies doing biotechnology and what that might look like to do the work in that space. So I think that there is some degree of the bioeconomy is much more geographically diverse than we think about it, but we're not hearing about it. And so that, maybe that tie, especially that tie to local community colleges, local 4-H organizations and FFA, and to consider food, agriculture, environmental, biotechnology, because that is what is motivating students. They're less motivated by medical and biopharma because they recognize those already. They already see it. It's established industries. So they're looking for more opportunities in more diverse bioeconomy industries. And we just need to talk about it more.
Yeah, it's a great point. We're often talking about skills, but what, a lot of people care about is applications and how they can get involved in working on those cool applications. Okay, we have another question here, Barbara.
Actually, I think Emily really just touched on this. I was struck by when, Tammy, when you were describing, a disconnect between ability and interest in these students. And, it made me think, like, we've been talking a lot about the volume of internship opportunities and the infrastructure and whether there are teachers available in these places to provide the kind of training that these students might want. But that's assuming that they're already interested in looking for those opportunities. So I was struck by that statement because it suggests that they're losing interest earlier. And Emily, maybe you were talking to this a little bit. Maybe it's that they just don't have enough, there's not enough visibility to what other kinds of jobs exist in biotech. Like we see these college jobs fairs and people coming to campuses to say, here's, look at our industry, look at what we do. These are the kinds of jobs we have. Do we not have something like that for biotech that extends beyond pharma or enough of it? Is that where we're sort of losing interest? And Natalie, I wonder if you find a common thread in the students that do kind of go all the way through those beautiful plots that you had where you see the smaller pipeline and it kind of gets leakier and leakier as you go through. But in that sort of small space of STEM interested students that go all the way through to a job, is there like a common thread that keeps their interest, or is it really just a matchmaking? Tammy, like you suggested, do we need like more of a matchmaking solution to showcase what the options are for these students to maintain their interest?
I know that Natalie's got great stories about this, and I'm sure Linnea and Tammy and Tyson do too. The first thing that I would say is I think that we could benefit from more project and application-based education, that there needs to be a tie in the formal education settings to the project, to the work that can be done, the actual applications of the work, because I think that is kind of in part what's motivating students, is knowing that they're not just learning the skills and the techniques. That gets them going, but that is not what's motivating them. What's motivating them is the impact that they can have. And so having more, especially in high school and community college, and community colleges do well at this, but high school and undergraduate degrees especially need to be more the project and programs based on application.
So how many project-based courses are there for students who are being diverted from science because teachers and others think they can't do science and they don't even know about these opportunities? It's kind of interesting. We work with several students that essentially, indirectly, they're being diverted from even investigating science or even realize what they're doing as science, because educationally, they were like, well, this may not be the career for you. And that's true out there. The majority of biotech programs in high school, so many of them are geared towards what they call the college-bound student. Give me the welder. Give me the occupational student. Give me the plumber. It's amazing. I start talking about biotech with people who work in plumbing or construction, and you know what? They're all interested. They just didn't know they were interested. They didn't even know what biotech was. They didn't know about the enzymes that's in their detergent. No one told them, so I mean, how many of us were led into science and how many students are led away from students? My niece became interested in cosmetology. And when I started telling her about the products that she used in the hair salon, that some of these are biotech based, she wanted to know more. So, I mean, I just feel like every student should be given a chance to be exposed to this. And maybe they would be more interested if they realized that it could be the root of many things they do in their everyday life. Right, Tammy?
I'll just try to bring both threads together for just a second. There's data for a very large cohort of students, something like 100,000 students, who in ninth grade had expressed interest in STEM careers. By 11th grade, more than half have disappeared from STEM careers. So we are, as we say, actively turning away students. And then the question is, what can we do about it? Why are they turning away? What are these hurdles that they're seeing? I completely agree. I think math is a big part of it. We could have a whole separate conversation about math, which is vitally important. But if we can think about what's in the realm of our control here, project-based learning, for sure. Students seeing their ideas having meaning in the world. This is a very motivated generation who want to make the world a better place. So finding a way that they can do that is something they're actively looking for. The other thing that students are actively looking for is validation that they're good at this, that they have promise. And that's where the skills and the micro-credentialing early on can really make a difference. If you are tested by an evaluator and they say, great, you passed, you're really good at aseptic technique, I think that can turn a switch to say, well, maybe I should start to explore that or think about that as a possibility.
I agree. I just want to say micro-credentialing, doing it in chunks and getting them to succeed in chunks is better than a 16-week class in many cases. Give them small chunks to succeed at.
I think it's science identity, right? Ability to identify that they have a place in science and that they have skills in science.
Right. I agree, Natalie. And one thing I would add to it's an interesting phenomenon we're seeing here in Utah, and that is we have unprecedented enrollment levels in our high school biotech programs. We've never seen this type of demand from our high school students, while enrollments in our post-secondary programs, our community college and our university are down. Why? What is going on? And I'm just going to be frank. I think a lot of it, and I think Natalie, I've been listening to what you're saying, and it's starting to spark a thought in me. And it's, I had written down even before you said it, our students want to do good with their future, with their careers. It's a different motivation for them. And what I've been seeing in our post-secondary partners, and Linnea, I mean, I was born from the community college for this biotech stuff. There's a certain level of passivity going on right now in the way our post-secondary partners and even our industry partners are promoting their own efforts, their own work. And it's not resonating with these high school.
Oh my God, stop making students memorize books. Can you stop?
Yeah,
Throw
it's
the book
not
out and
it's
put it
not
in the field.
Yeah. And so I think, we've been trying to work with our post-secondary partners and our industry partners to say, hey, you need to change how you communicate the value of your own work because it's not hitting with our kids. And I mean, and you've got this bounty of students waiting to transition into your programs, and it's just a communication disconnect. So
And I think, Tammy, what really resonates with me is I see it's one of the things that we have to constantly coach our senior leadership around is, we're owned by a private equity firm, right? And as you move up in science, you eventually get to that PI realm where all of a sudden now you're thinking, how much revenue am I generating? That tied to the science that I'm doing, right? But people want to come to do great science, but it's just eventually you get to a level where they're talking about and the way that they're having to think about the business is in all of these dollars and cents types of ways and these metrics that then when they turn to a brand new entry level student coming out of college that's excited about science and they're starting to do work, they're saying, I don't care. I don't want to generate revenue. I want to change the world.
Okay, I promise I won't talk anymore. Just let me tell me one more story and I'll be quiet. So in our incubator, a woman showed up. She wanted to save her son's life. He had a metabolic disorder, couldn't process certain long chain fatty acids. She had no background in science. They said her son was going to die. She, a business person, learned the science and figured out what she had to do to be able to create the business around it, and she did it. That's one of the best students for my students, is like, here's a person who knows nothing and wants to save her son's life. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Thanks. It's a great story, and I think again that the motivation why people come to this come to the bioeconomy, I think is just really critical. I see a bunch of questions from our board members, so I'll try to get to all of you here. Anne, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I just want to probe a little bit more with all of you this question of credentialing and the associate degree, and what does that mean? And is that actually a positive thing to create a set of credentials, or is it better to take the immersion, the sort of the European a year, not a summer internship, but a year experience in a company or something like that? Are we wasting time, or is it beneficial to create credentials? I certainly understand what you're saying about micro credentialing. I know how to do X, Y, and Z. Has perhaps a different impact. But it seems to me that there's no system that would create a sort of national way in which people acquire credentials that could be understood, beyond a very local environment. I'm just wondering how you all think, is that in any way a solution to try to do a better job with credentialing, or is that just a distraction?
I think you have to do both. I know Natalie's going to jump in, but I'm just saying we do micro credentials in addition, of course, to our degrees and certificates. So, I mean, based on the system you have now, unless we change degrees and certificates, you have to do this. But then within the system, we have micro credentials. And no, you can do it national. Aseptic technique is aseptic technique. Okay, so it's just a matter of who's doing it. Natalie and I both work with an organization called BSCI, and they're doing a great job. There's certain parameters that have to go with the micro credential to make it worthwhile. And I will let Natalie talk about that, not me.
No, I just will go back to that chart that showed the jobs in life science industry. The vast majority of them currently require a bachelor's degree or higher. Those are credentials. The ones that are that 20% that are at the associate's degree or at the high school, I think those could be a student could feel like their resume would matter and they'd stand a good chance of being hired with a micro credential. So I think it's a yes and.
Okay, but so who's in charge, or how does that actually get implemented, I guess, is my question. It certainly is exactly that graph that was in my mind. So that means that needs to be an active role or contribution of companies, biotech.
That's right. Industry determines this, not us. Industry has to determine the parameters for exit points. I always worry when academicians start determining exit points without industry. It's industry.
Conscious of time here, so I want to make sure we can get through our next couple of questions. So Nathan, why don't you go next?
Yeah, thank you all for the great work you're doing. For background, I have dual roles. I'm at the Buck, which is a nonprofit research institute, and I'm also chief science officer for a large health and wellness company. So I guess you brought up a bunch of really fascinating things, and I'm just sort of curious, and I apologize if you showed more of this than maybe got into my brain, but it's like, I'm curious, like kind of the data of like the on-ramp and the off-ramp for a lot of these people. You mentioned that like post undergrad is a big off-ramp for people. So we're turning people off. As you mentioned, a number of us are guilty of that. I've taught undergrad, so I can, feel guilty about that as well. But I'm just curious, like the data, like kind of like a market survey or something like this. What kind of like data do each of you sort of have in terms of, do we kind of know what got people most interested in science in terms of different avenues? What are the off ramps, that kind of what turned them off? Do we kind of know what that is? I just love to see, like, from any of your perspectives where you've done research or gathered data, or there, what's kind of known about this? And it's kind of maybe maybe we don't do a lot of big surveys or something, but just kind of curious, what kind of data you might have, or the ways that this has been thought about systematically. And happy to start with whoever has something to say.
I could go very quickly. Of one off ramp that I know is a challenge for us is the fact that in our industry, you got to be on site and you can't work remote. You can at a certain level, you can start to get into some of that hybrid, but you got to be physically there on site, and just that's certainly a challenge with just some of the generational dynamics that we have today.
Sure.
I will just share one story from a upskilling program here in Massachusetts that was saying after 10 weeks of training an adult who had been working at Amazon in skills in biotech, the offers that individual got for entry-level jobs in biotech were less in terms of pay than he was getting at Amazon, so he went back to Amazon. So I think there are demands that the industry makes of being on site and having, certain skills and things like that can narrow the funnel. But I think there's also a lot of things that are pulling in other directions for individuals. Pay is part of it. And what it can do for the world is the other part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And think about these students in biotech who are getting jobs in semiconductor. They moved over because they got better pay in semiconductor. I told our industry in the local area in biotech, you have to raise your salaries or I cannot get students because they're going to go in IT and semiconductor.
I think for our students too, we see a culture, kind of competition with tech industry. I've yet to see any life science company have a basketball court in-house or a gaming lounge. And our tech companies are always doing the one-up game on who can have the most playful and engaging work site possible. So, and our students really, they gravitate to those types of, corporate cultures. I also know one of the things that we've seen in our companies, and this is within the life science biomedical companies, our students are not stupid. They know that going to work for certain companies that provide on-site healthcare, they are communicating that you will get, a quality of life when you work for them. Not all of our life science companies have gotten on board with that yet, quite frankly. And the ones who have, like ARUP, Recursion, they're the ones that are getting the entry-level talent. And they're also creating jobs specifically for high school graduates. They're being mindful and attentive to the needs of fresh young hires and providing mentoring, kind of sponsorship opportunities for those in special entry-level positions. So, and those companies, the word gets out. I mean, I don't know about other states, but, we're a fairly small community here in Utah. The word gets out that that's not the company you want to work for. This is the company you want to work for because they give you this, this, and this. And it comes down again to another being passively or actively communicating the value of your own company, let alone your industry.
Yeah, I think, thank you all. Those were great insights. And Tam, you definitely hit on a sore spot for myself because my brother is a CEO of a tech company in Utah, and they got an indoor basketball court very early in their life cycle. So I do appreciate that.
Free coffee bars. We've got free coffee bar at Qualtrics.
I'll add the basketball court to my budget. All right. I think we have time for one more question from the board. So India, why don't you take it?
I hope I can form this as a question. Well, because it's something I'm wondering about, but it seems like, or at least when I was in elementary school, high school, a lot of science classes are really they're sort of like the history of science. I mean, like you're learning facts, you're learning about things that are already known, and the curiosity, the idea of research and struggling with an unknown is not part of that. In a lot of ways, it's kind of similar to like history classes or something. And then when you actually get into maybe undergrad, but definitely, grad school, then you're doing research and it's very different from that. And so I feel like there could almost be a mismatch. People that are really good at the fact learning part of science, they might get into grad school and they're like, we're just like, there's no guidance here. It's just a wide open field, and it might not really like that very much. And meanwhile, some of the people who maybe did like that in the creative part and, of science, maybe those are the ones you lose because they're like, oh, well, this is the same as history or math or, something. So I don't know. Is that,
Yes.
I think that's a problem or is,
Yes.
yeah.
You know about You Teach. So, when I was at NSF, I got involved with You Teach. Teachers need to be scientists. They need to be science people first, and then they're educators, because then they'll become the best educators. Because no matter what age group you're working with, you have to stir the imagination of a student, whether it's first, second, third, or fourth grade, it doesn't matter. And I guarantee some of the best ways to do that is open-ended questions even then, and satisfy the curiosity. But I guarantee professional development for teacher means you have to turn these teachers into individuals who can ask questions themselves and know how to research that, and also do guided failure with students, because you can't just let people fail. You have to do what I call guided failure. That's what we do with our students. They fail, and then you help them ask questions, and then you help them research that, no matter what the age group. But this is professional development for teachers, so that they don't just have students memorizing stuff. That's how I kind of feel about it. I don't care what age group you're doing.
Linnea, it's interesting because I listened to your question, India, and it kind of dials back, to 2000 when we were looking into this idea of a 2-year community college biotechnology program, right? And I think that has been the value of these community college biotech programs, because they really truly are modeled after what you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge I think we have sometimes is, as Natalie, your slide indicated, we know for a fact that a number of these jobs in life sciences do actually require some reasonable, training in post-secondary or bachelor's degree at least, right? The challenge is when they leave those 2-year community college programs and they go into employment, the idea of going in and finishing their bachelor's degree in a traditional university setting that isn't hands-on, isn't inquiry-based, isn't open-ended, it's almost like they feel like I know
They hate it. They absolutely hate it. My
They
students
do.
who then have to go to a 4-year school, they all complain. They don't do labs. They don't ask questions.
And so that's the challenge.
I'm memorizing books again. But you see what I'm saying? Even in K through 12, you have to have a teacher that knows how to guide students in asking questions. Because that's what our kids do. They ask questions. And so check out You Teach, what You Teach is.
The reason I'm a scientist is because of a hands-on experience in 8th grade is the reason I'm a scientist. And the reason that I went to graduate school rather than did something else, now that I do something else rather than science, was because of the hands-on science aspect of it. And that's what keeps kids interested
and don't cheapen their education too. Like when my grandchildren wanted a telescope, I bought something that could see the moons of Jupiter. I freaked out my daughter-in-law because she asked me how much I spent. But the whole thing is, you need to treat these kids. You have to give them the best equipment, no matter what age they are, because they know what they're getting.
I would love to keep this going. You know, I know I've kept you all a bit longer than we planned to, but I do want to give first of all thank everyone for joining us for this a really important conversation, and I do want to give everyone you know, one last chance to comment on, you know, where you see things going, you know, from your perspective, particularly with regards to you know, requirements for the workforce. So if there's like one you know, one aspect of training that you think needs to change in the near future, you know, I'd love to hear more about that. But again, thanks everyone for all the great comments. But yeah, if there's one thing that you'd like to change about you know, education for a workforce, you know, what would it be?
Duplicate what's happening in industry. We model our program after what industry does. It's a seamless transition, including multitasking.
For those students that are going beyond to getting bachelor's degree and beyond, I think the experience is not just the knowledge and the skills in science, but the experiences beyond that. The education, the multidisciplinary education, and the education in business practices, communications, etc. Especially for graduate students, they need more training than just science.
I would say that a concerted effort to build science identity in students could have a multi-pronged effect, many ways to do that, that could draw more of our talent into science.
I guess I think there needs to be more collaboration with our education industry partners beyond just a skill set and beyond just, you know, talent development. I think truth in advertising, let these kids know what the job is and prepare them for the idea of what they can do and change and make a better place in the world. But also say, hey, every now and then you're going to get a, you know, a churn and grind day, and it's going to be boring. Not every job, you know, very few jobs have earth-shattering days every day. And I think just getting those kids talking and getting mentors within the companies to say, hey, I have boring days, I have really exciting days. I mean, this is the way it goes.
That's life.
And I think that it's just that the students, if they don't know what they're getting into, the decision isn't going to go in favor of the company. They want to know what they're getting into. And so I think working with companies more to turn that light on inside that dark box that really makes students afraid to make decisions that they may have to live with and they don't want to, so they go somewhere where they know better.
Yeah.
And I would reiterate what everyone said and echo all of those pieces. And I think I would just add, focusing on like the problem solving nature of what we do. We're here solving big problems, and every day there's a chance to solve a problem. And when you do have those tough days, that's just one of those problems to try to navigate through. And because we certainly see that on the industry side, somebody can have one bad day and they're just very quick to one out. And so, you know, we constantly have to coach to that. But certainly our most passionate people that are most successful in their industry and career are just naturally problem solvers, and they love to solve problems.
Well, again, thank you so much for joining. Really looking forward to continuing this conversation. So again, thanks again, and looking forward to working with all of you on new opportunities. So
yeah, let's have a sleepover.
I'll host it at our basketball court. So yeah,
that's right.
Thank you so very much. We really appreciate your time and energy today, and we would love to work with you more as we sort of figure out what we should be doing to help you all out, if anything.
And thanks to our online audience too. We appreciate having the opportunity to share the expertise of our wonderful speakers. And thanks also to Patrick for moderating.
So we're going to take a 5-minute break and come back, board members, to come back and join our closed session. So thank you so very much.
Bye-bye.